Hi, my name is Milan, and welcome to another episode of Sabbath School U. Today we're going right into Lesson 12, the Church Militant. And here to discuss it, we have David, Gina, and Phil. So Phil, can you help us kick off with a word of prayer?
Yes. Lord, we are honored and blessed to be here, and we just pray that you will inspire and lead us and let us honor you with our words and our discussion and our thoughts. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. So this lesson, we're going right into the churches that are described in the book of Revelation. But before we get into that, how about the title of this lesson, the Church Militant? How do you guys feel about the title?
I had a problem with it. I immediately, when I read it, I was looking for something that was militant, military, all that stuff. And to me, it just doesn't seem to fit.
I actually kind of disagree a little bit with you there. Going into the lesson and seeing how Jesus was starting to correct all of the churches and say, you guys are doing this wrong. I have a friend in the military. It just kind of reminded me of the drill sergeants. They would always be like, "What are you doing, Brian?" What is going on?
Yeah, just do that one more time.
They're just like, what are you doing? And so they try to correct them. They tell them what to do. And the whole purpose of a drill sergeant is to make a good soldier out of these men and women. It's to assist them as best as they can. So I think that's what Jesus was trying to do to each of these churches, point out what they were doing wrong and try to help them get better.
See, my thing was, I was kind of picturing John, and I was picturing, John as the writer of this book and all that stuff. And John, to me, he strikes me as this guy that wouldn't hurt a fly. Where he's off in his own Patmos Island with all these other people, and here's where God talks to him and gives him these prophecies to write down. So that's what I was looking at. But it's interesting that you took the focus off of John, which I kind of like, and put it onto Jesus as the militant.
Yeah, I like that too. Oh,
I kind of, just 2 minutes before we started, I was talking and he brought up that point and I was on your side, but then I just kind of switched over to his, and I do like that idea where, you're preparing your army and you're getting everyone ready, you're telling them what they can work on, what they're doing great on, and then not necessarily seeing John, but seeing Jesus as the one who's getting us ready for what we're about to get on with.
Yeah, I'm definitely Team David on this one too. I was with Phil, we were talking about this before. We were just not understanding the title. I felt like it was unfair to put the title militant on John, when in my mind I saw him as the church's scribe. Right. Jesus told him, hey, or he was just taking notes essentially on what Jesus was revealing to him. So I felt like that was unfair. But I love your description, and I think, that's the answer, I think.
Soon we'll be able to convince you too.
Phil needs to defend himself.
I'm on Team David too. You've won me over, and it's, even with this, with the militant, I think of people going out to war. Like the militant is the one that's the aggressive one that goes off and runs, runs towards the other people, and he just, no holds barred, just kind of that's what I picture. But I like your idea of the militant isn't just that person that trains soldier, but the person that's training the soldier. Mm-hmm. And to me, that is powerful. And it takes my idea that I now think was completely wrong. and it takes my second idea and makes me think that didn't even go far enough to, this drill sergeant, which I wish I could do the voice as well as.
I know. I was hoping you would do that one again.
Yeah, it was kind of a one-time thing.
Now's the time to TiVo and rewind your episode.
Right. So how about the memory verse for this text? Does anyone mind reading it? I think it's Revelation 3, verse 20.
I'll read it. Revelation 3:20 says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and dine with him, and he with me."
I think that's pretty encouraging. I mean, just the verse, if you were just to look at that by itself without really, looking at the message to the church in Laodicea, it's an open invitation from Jesus, hey, if you're willing and able, just answer the door.
And it's that simple, you know. And I always think of that. There's this, I don't know if it's like a painting, but you kind of see Jesus and like he's knocking on the door, and like you would think that he'd already, at least for me, he'd already be in the house, you know, hanging out and eating, but he's standing there, you know, waiting, like, hey guys, let me in, I want to eat, please, you know, I want to spend time with you guys and commune. So I always think of that picture when I read that verse.
And if it's the picture that I'm thinking of, I remember someone pointing out when I was looking at it that the door on the outside doesn't have a doorknob or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So the artist made it so that Jesus can't work his way in. Mm-hmm. You've got to invite him in.
It's got to come from the inside. Oh, okay.
When I was reading this, what stood out to me was the part where I'll come in and dine with him. And it made me think, my wife and I have been, for the fun of it, we will go and look at model homes, and ones that we've kind of liked the most have been the ones where you have an entryway and you have kind of like a living room to the side, and then you go into the back of the house, the main part of the house, and that's where the family room is, and the kitchen, that's where like the family stays. And it made me think of, when I was reading this, it made me think of that, where like I feel like with these homes, you walk in, the living room is for, you know, your guests that stop by that aren't really like family. Or, you know, like I picture, this is outdated, but I picture like the traveling vacuum sales guy who it's like, sure, I'll look at your vacuums. Like you I've never had any of those come to my door.
Don't come in too far.
But no, it's kind of like, this is the visitor sitting area.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you go into the back where the food is and where the family room is and all that, like only special guests get to go back there. Only the very welcome family members and close friends and all that. So when I was reading this verse, I was picturing that, and I was saying, you know, like that shows the relationship where like Jesus is welcome into like the family areas mm-hmm, of the home. Mm-hmm. That's where you eat and that's where you commune and all that stuff. He's not just a visitor that steps in, you let him into the door to get out of like the bad weather. Like mm-hmm. he comes in and joins you for like the intimate moments.
And it's true, because when you think about eating, you know, breaking bread, it's not something that you do with just anybody in your home. It's like you'll go out, yeah, and you'll eat with whoever, but when you're at your house, will you really just let in the vacuum salesman? No. Only certain people will have what it takes to be able to make it to that inner room and have that type of communion with the family.
I think more so is that not only is it that you're letting somebody into your house, but you're giving them access to your own resources. I mean, if you're not prepared for a visitor and you know they ask to come in, and you suddenly invite them to dinner, I mean, you have to make do with what you have. So it just kind of is like when you let Jesus in though, and he's and like it says in the verse that you and I will come into him and dine with him and he with me. It's an exchange. It's not just you giving everything to him. You may be giving him a physical meal, but he's giving you a spiritual meal in return. And so it's something where you become a little bit more, I guess, the only word that comes to mind, I guess, is vulnerable, because you're giving up something that you didn't prepare at all for. And now, you know, Jesus is in your house, having that intimate moment.
And I like what you said, because I didn't think of it, but you are giving up your resources, and it's almost like to have this relationship with Christ, you do have to give up a little bit. Mm-hmm. He doesn't ask for, you know, something ridiculous, but he does ask you to give up a little bit.
Right.
And to me, that's kind of powerful. I'd never thought of that.
Yeah, and thankfully, it's not a lot that you're giving up. You know, like in this image, in this metaphor, you're just opening the door. You know, it's not like, you know, people think, oh, I have to do so much for Jesus to accept me or to want to
like,
be with me.
Here's this long list of things I've got to do.
Exactly. He's just saying, just open the door, and then I'll take care of the rest.
Yeah.
And that's really comforting.
You know, another thing that comes to mind is the whole dining thing. And in our society, we're used to, and who knows what your tables are like, but, you know, if you have a four-sided table and you've got four people, you each sit on one side, and you have your own plate, and you have your own silverware, and you have kind of your own meal that you've got in front of you. But back then, they were much closer together. They'd recline right next to each other. And I could be wrong in this, but I picture kind of like Ethiopian food, where it's one communal thing where everybody kind of reaches in and grabs stuff. So I feel like it's a very intimate communal thing. instead of just staying to your side and
Yeah.
talking about what happened at work that day. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
But I
A
really
more
like
intimate
this.
setting. Yeah.
I love this verse, and I love the imagery that it gives of the relationship with Christ that we can have, that he invites us to.
Right. So the or do you want
So these churches, guys.
Yeah.
We should get into that. I was studying this lesson, and this isn't new information. You always hear of the 7 churches, and my dad is a pastor's kid. So, every time I have a question.
You're not, but your dad is.
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm a pastor's grandkid. I went to him.
EGK.
Yeah.
Okay. Never heard that, but we need to start saying that.
There you go. That works. So I went to him and I said, Dad, I'm happy. Every time I have a question, I'll go to him. And I said, so Dad, these 7 churches, you're pretty knowledgeable when it comes to things from the Bible. Can you tell me off the top of your head what are the good and the bad things about each of these churches? Because, you're always hearing about that Jesus will point out the good things and he'll point out the bad things. And so I asked my dad, and he kind of looks at me. He's like, "Of course." And at that moment, the phone rings, and so he runs out, and then the next thing I know, he comes to me like with his computer and his tablet, and he's all like Googling it for me. And I was like, "Wait, Dad, so you don't actually know like off the top of your head, like as an Adventist, what they all are and have them memorized?" And he was like, "No, but I mean, I have an idea."
It's like, well, Dad, I could Google
And
it.
so, yeah, I could have done that too. I was
I
just more
showed you
curious.
how to do that.
Right.
I was more curious just to know if these kinds of churches are, like the 10 Commandments. Everyone in this, knows the 10 Commandments, but not everyone knows things about the churches, knows their good things and their bad things. And so I kind of like the idea of kind of brushing up on it so that you have that fresh in your mind. And since it is so important, just to kind of know where we identify. So that was my studying this part of the lesson.
Funny, when I was young and just kind of putting myself out there as to how kind of like nerdy I was, and still kind of am.
Very much so.
I grew up in church school, so studied, Adventist theology and Revelation for sure. I couldn't recall any of the churches off the top of my head. So, you're not alone with that. But I remember like studying the churches and saying, which one do I want to belong to? And like kind of like stressing about it. Like, well, do I fall under this one, Sardis, or like Philadelphia or Laodicea? Like I remember kind of stressing about it when I was younger. I mean, didn't really have an answer.
You always knew like Laodicea was the one that would always like kind of resurface, and you'd be like,
Right.
okay, so that one's got something. We need to pay attention to that one.
See, I would hear people say something like that, like, "Oh, we're and this is prophetic, so like we're in the Church of Laodicea, we're all the stuff." And I would think, but you know what? Like, there's stuff about this other church that it makes me think, like, we're doing that too.
Right.
And then this other church, like, we're doing that. And I'd look at all of them and I'd think, you know what? We're doing all of that stuff.
All the above.
So I always had trouble with this because I would think, like I get the premise of it, and it's prophecy and it shows time and all that stuff. But I've always thought, like, there's so many things that I feel like either I personally connect with or like society connects with. And I just think like it just seems to apply to all of us, or all of it applies to us.
I think it's one of those things where it becomes a huge matter of identification, where either, like you said, like you personally identify with it, or you say, I think my church is kind of like this. Like, I think my church acts in this way. And so it just kind of makes you wonder, like, do you want to fix what that one church is doing, or do you want to do all of the changes that all of the churches are told? Like, it's really just a weird balance. And the balance itself is trying to figure out what is wrong. Because a lot of times we fall into this problem where we only do works, or we only focus on love. And it's a matter of balancing both of those out. We do have to do certain works, but it has to be done through love. Otherwise, there's no point. So it's a really tough balance when looking at all these churches and what things that they failed in or what things they were good in, and trying to see how we can be better in that way.
And I agree. And I'm not the person that can give a deep biblical study about the 7 churches or anything like that. And, you know, I came to this lesson, I was studying it, and I thought, like, I got to lower my standards because I'm not going to be this scholar that's been studying it for their whole life that's going to show all this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was reading this and I was saying, you know, if we focus on just one church and feel like that's the message to us, then I worry that we're missing the message that comes from all of them. And we're missing out the true importance that the reason that these are in the Bible, because I feel like, you know, part of it is to show that this is prophecy that God revealed, like through Revelation, that this was what was happening and this is what happened and this is what's to come. But I also feel like the whole thing is there for us to learn from. So if we focus on just one, we're going to miss out on some really important stuff.
And there's a reason that they are all in there. Because if, you know, we only needed to focus on one, we only would have gotten one. Like, obviously, you know, Laodicea, there would have been, you know, just one section on that one and, you know, focus on this because this. But we're able to see that there are certain things that you can learn from the other ones and maybe even apply to your own church.
And I like what you were saying earlier, David, about finding that balance. You know, there is always that emphasis of like, God loves you and accepts you where you are. And then we kind of like to brush aside like, oh, you know, but you can't do this. You know, not you can't, but you shouldn't. Love should compel you not to do certain things. And that comes to mind, especially when I would read the sections in each message to the church where God is like, I have this complaint against you. I was like, whoa, that's really intense. You know, like he said, okay, I see you doing this and I see you doing this, but this is what you need to work on. Like, oh, okay, that really brings it home.
It's like what his friend was saying, you know, like he'll tell you what
Yeah.
he won't hesitate to
to
tell
do.
you what's wrong. And I mean, why not? Like, you know, if you do want to grow and if you do want to rise above, you know, you do need to figure out what it is that is holding you back. What are the things that you're doing wrong so that you can learn from those mistakes and correct them for whatever is to come in the future.
So there's this question that's posed in the lesson that I think would be interesting to talk about. It says, if you were to end up in heaven right now, would you fit in? And then me personally, I thought that really like took me off guard. Like, whoa, like, how did I get up here? You know, like, what am I doing here? And if like me being Milan, you know, just like how I am, you know, just me like ended up in heaven, I'm not sure that I would fit in. I mean, because when Jesus comes back and brings up the people who believe in him, they're changed. Like in a moment, twinkling of an eye, you know, we shall behold him, we'll be like him. And that's like, so we would naturally fit in. But like me right now, I'm like, no, I don't know. So I did like the question because it made me feel really bad.
Well, I think it's an interesting question because it's extremely complicated.
Yeah.
It's like because you know already that it states in the Bible that Jesus is going to come back like a thief in the night. Nobody knows when. Nobody knows when at all. And so if he were to come, let's say in the next hour, would we, would we be ready? Would we fit in? And so it's just like, are we asking the question of would we fit in with no change whatsoever, like no elimination of the negative things that we have gone through throughout the earth, throughout our time on earth, or is it going to be with that transformation? You know, so if it's going to be with that transformation, then those who were close to Jesus, they will fit in. Those who are not close to Jesus, they will not.
So when you're saying transformation, and I mean, I think you said it too, are you talking in terms of character or are you talking in terms of like physical?
Character.
Okay, because I'm assuming from this question, what it's saying is if you were, suddenly in heaven, it's not like if you were suddenly in heaven after your character had been changed, would you fit in?
Right.
So for me, that question means more, is your character right now heaven modeled, I guess, and would it fit in? And then that's when I get a little worried and I'm like, oh man, that's deep. Like, you need to be living, you need to be ready because he will come as a thief in the night. And you might not have time to just, like when you're taking a test and, it's tomorrow and you're like trying to like cram and like change really fast, or not change, but acquire all that knowledge really fast. You can't do that. you can't change your character overnight. It's something that's a gradual process, and you need, God's help to do it and change. And so for me, that question was a little bit like, oh man, I got to get on that. Like, you need to be thinking about it every day.
See, and I agree with you, because I feel like they're going for, not just are we perfect right now? Mm-hmm. Are we at the point where our lives are modeled, and is our character kind of reflecting the relationship that we have with Christ?
Exactly. Okay.
That's what I pictured. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I was thinking, like Milan, like I picture, heaven of perfect people, and everybody's perfectly happy and nothing goes wrong, and everything's just this pristine, perfect world. And I think, that's not my life right now. I don't fit in. And I agree with Milan. I have trouble with this question, because I think I don't know that's what I would want to be focused on, because right now I don't fit in. But at the same time, I feel like what they're going at is exactly what our PGK said. Exactly that it's like, is our character modeled after and modeling, is it to the point where we've got that relationship? That's what I'm picturing. But at the same time, I would even wonder, like there are going to be people there that we didn't expect.
Right.
So it makes me think, maybe we shouldn't be working towards perfection, but thinking, right.
Yeah, because I guess you wouldn't really be in heaven. I'm not sure. But, if you get up there.
That's where you get into like that
right,
deeper idea.
Because if you do get there and you see people you weren't expecting, and you're in your feelings about it, like, wait, hold up. Yeah, it's kind of, yeah. This is really deep. This is really deep.
Are you really in, like, there? I mean, like,
it's really
I feel like I know what you're saying. Like, I can read your mind. I can't just put it into words. Like, you shouldn't be thinking those kinds of things if you're in heaven.
Right.
You shouldn't, oh, wow, that person ended up here.
Like, oh, great. Praise the Lord. And not like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
See, I think that's what it's going to be, though. And we're getting into heaven and all that stuff. But I think that's what it's going to be, where it's going to be like, you made it too? Wow. Yeah. That's awesome. Like, I'm happy to be here. I'm glad you're here. That's what I think it'll be. I don't think we'll be like, wow, man, I didn't think that.
Yeah, like have a group in the corner, like, let's figure this out. Like,
what happened?
What happened after college or something? Yeah.
Oh, man.
But since we are talking, kind of talk about heaven, before that happens, Christ talks about the church as a whole, not just the individual ones, as like his bride. He's coming down to get his bride. So one point that comes to mind, in society now, like divorce is just so ubiquitous. Everyone is just, it doesn't seem like marriage is
last.
Yeah, they don't last, and it's kind of like a joke almost. So in this society where, we have a hard time, especially like our generation, really grasping marriage, like, how do you think, is this like a message that you think really resonates with people our age? Like, what do you guys think about, like, the whole concept? Like, what does it mean to you? And do you think, like, is this a message that is still relevant today?
So I think that topic where you're saying our generation has a hard time grasping marriage, I don't know if you mean that in terms of, like, because of the example that we see in the secular world, I guess, would...
I don't think it's just the secular world, though.
Okay.
That's true.
But I'm sorry.
I'm thinking about it more in terms of, like, yes, I as being a person of my generation that is still in the church, I'm not gonna so easily be swayed by what I'm seeing in that, like, topic. I mean, in terms of divorce, just because, somebody in Hollywood decided to take it lightly and, do it on a dare, or any type of thing that kind of makes marriage seem a little bit less than what it actually was originally designed to be. I'm not going to think anything less of it just because that's what I see. Like, that's what's the norm, or that's what's popular. Like, I was still brought up to think of marriage in the traditional sense, like the good, and still have faith in the concept and in the idea that the whole marriage was made to last, whereas people nowadays don't really take it that way.
I think that's awesome that that's the way that you see it, and I fully support you and agree with it. But I mean, when you asked that, I almost laughed because it made me think of a show that I watched where they set people up on blind dates, and in one episode, the two people got married. And I remember seeing one of them say, like, I didn't think that this date would end with me getting married, but I'm married. And then the wife or the woman said, you know, like, if it doesn't work out, I get half his stuff. So, whatever.
Wow.
So I feel like there are a lot of people that don't have that mindset.
Correct, yeah.
And the good thing is that the Bible isn't just for the people that have it right and that have it figured out. Like, the Bible needs to go to the people, you know, the people that really need it are the ones that don't have it, that didn't grow up with it, that don't have the direction that God and the Bible wants to give. And so I feel like, you know, if society can't, kind of like what you're going with, if society can't, you know, stick to one thing and stick to their commitments, then I feel like it would be harder to stick to the commitments or even trust God, because the example that they have is, you know, some person that gets married on a whim.
Right.
Yeah, but you know, I think it's important to note that a lot of the things that we may see as traditional or that is normal or good for the church, it's not always going to comply with society. I mean, because Jesus himself, as he lived, he was not a person to be with. He was a target, basically, at all times. And so I feel like the beliefs that we try to reflect from Jesus, they're not always going to just fit in with society. So the topic of marriage, you know, it might, you know, get to some people a little bit differently than,
I feel like that is a can of worms.
Yeah.
It's like a whole topic for like a whole nother
a whole nother episode, whole nother lesson.
But I would say, you know, and what's shown in the letters to the churches and all that stuff, it may not fit with society and it may not be compatible as much, but the reward that we have is great. And you see this in each of the letters to the churches. Christ, he explains a reward that is amazing, more than I would even think to ask for.
Awesome. Well, any like final words really quickly?
I'm glad I ran into this lesson. It gave me a chance to brush up on my knowledge of the churches, and my dad too.
And I think the military reminder, I think, was probably the best part.
Right.
David sold me on the title.
Well, all right. That's our show for today. Thank you for participating, and we hope you were blessed.